Hey, what's up, all you art geeks? Today I'm demonstrating a painting of my subject Marley. This is an 18 by 24 inch. I decided to go with some fun greens with this painting. And while I'm painting this, I thought, why not have a little bit of a discussion about how to keep your practice simple, how to keep your art practice simple. Because it's very easy to get overwhelmed. There's so many aspects to having an art practice, from the marketing to the office work to the painting itself. Now, before we get into that, I just want to quickly mention that I do have a bunch of tutorials over on my Patreon account. If you want to learn how to paint a little bit more like me, if you want to just learn some of my tips and tricks, if you just want some inspiration, there's a lot of different tutorials on there to help you out, some exercises, some art downloads, a bunch of different things. So I want to get that out of the way really quick before we start talking about this art practice made simple idea. And I'll be honest, for me, it is a struggle. I constantly have to remind myself to do things in a certain way to keep things a little bit easier, as far as what time of day I want to work, what materials I want to use, and really just things that I need to do to make life as smooth as possible when creating artwork. I think the first thing I'd like to talk about is just how do you go through your day? How do I go through my day? So usually Mondays is a day for me to do some computer related things. I get these YouTube videos created on Mondays, usually try to get that out of the way. And then that's usually done sometime around noon, I guess, roughly. So Monday is really the only day I don't go straight into painting right away. I normally, Tuesday through Friday, I like to get some painting started right off the bat, but Mondays is sort of an exception. I like to get my YouTube video stuff figured out. Usually that takes around 2 to 4 hours. It kind of depends. I have a video editor that helps to get some of the upfront work done, but then I take over and do the rest of the editing and the voiceover, all of that. That's where it's just kind of handed off to me. But I do like having a video editor because she really helps to get the videos done and make sure I have one going a week to keep that consistency, because consistency with YouTube is so important. But I don't have things as planned out as I probably should. I think one of the things I like to work on a bit more is having the full week figured out, maybe even having my day-to-day locked in as simple and straightforward as possible, because I do have a bit of an ADD mind. I do find myself jumping to different things that have nothing to do with work. The second you turn on your computer, you have this ability to go on the internet and get bogged down by news stories or social media, whatever it might be. It's so easy to lose focus. So I try my hardest not to let all those apps that are just screaming for attention to get in my way. And that's the best way to organize, for me at least now, is to kind of keep it a little flexible, but I am trying to figure out ways to lock it in more. And there's always got to be some sort of office back end work that I just don't want to have to do, whether it's marketing, getting things shipped out, whatever it might be. There's a lot of things that get in the way of painting. So I try to get my painting done at the very beginning of the day. That to me is the most important thing to do, is to be painting all the time, because there are times in the week where I end up letting myself go maybe 2, even 3 days without painting. And then I struggle to get back into that flow. But then, yes, of course, I got to do my social media. That's maybe 10 minutes out of my day, 10 to 15 minutes out of my day, but it's very important to keep your presence known on social media. If you're an artist, I find that to be extremely important. But that's my week in a general nutshell. I'll maybe have another video where I talk about that a bit more, but that's one of the things that I think keeps my art practice a bit simpler, is by having a structured day. That way I know what I expect at the beginning of the day, and then I can reconfigure things as needed. That's my first one, is just staying organized, keeping a good schedule, and having a rhythm to your day. The next thing I think is pretty important to keeping your art practice simple would be limiting your tools and materials, especially if you're new to painting. Now, when I first started painting, I learned from a couple artists the impressionist style of painting, and I ended up looking at an artist. His name was David Chavetz, and he is an amazing still life painter, and he uses about 10 to 12 colors. My palette is very similar to his. Mine's made some slight adjustments and changes just for my own personal use over the years, but I found that his Impressionist palette was one of my favorites, so I ended up using his, and I've kept the 10, 11 colors the same for the last 10 years. I don't think I've changed it that much. It's about the same as it's always been, and that's a way for me to keep it simple. Now, you could always go even more simple than that. You could just have 5 colors on your palette. I think a really popular palette is having burnt umber, ultramarine blue, some sort of red, whether it's cadmium red, something in that sort of family of reds, and then cadmium yellow, and then a titanium white. Those are sort of the basic 5 colors anybody needs to reach, I'd say 85 to 90% of the color spectrum, maybe a little less. I add a few extra colors in there if I really want to get some intense oranges or some other intense colors that you just can't reach without a few additional colors on your palette. But that's a great place to start to keep it simple. So I'd start with those. Now, as far as brushes go, just get the usual brushes, maybe a number 0 all the way through a number 8, whether it's a flat, a filbert, a bright, whatever you want to try, but try to stick with something for a while and see if you like it before you jump to a bunch of other tools, because usually it's not the tools that make the artist, it's the artist that makes the tools work for them. So don't expect that you get some magical brush that it's going to make you any better at painting. I think if you're a great artist or if you're a practicing artist, you'll learn to get good with any tools you have. So keep those simple. Now, as far as surfaces go, I like to use panels. I like to use 1/8-inch hardboard panels, usually on a cradle, sometimes without a cradle on the back, that wood frame on the back of the panel, usually gesso. I have started to play around with some oil ground instead of gesso, but as long as it's got a decently smooth surface, I'm not a big fan of a lot of texture. I think that Trekell and Ampersand are my favorite 2 brands of gessoed panels, so go ahead and check them out. All right, so the next one I want to talk about is setting realistic goals, because it's very easy to get overwhelmed with all the things you want to get out of your art career. I've been painting for about 25 years now, but only for the last 10 years have I really been pursuing being a full-time professional artist. Some of my very simple goals right off the bat were to get a good solo show, get into some galleries, and grow my following on social media. So I've been really focusing on those things lately. And I've had some great solo shows. I've been in a lot of great group shows. I've won some awards, and all those things were on my list of things to do, those realistic goals. Now, there are only so many artists that can get in the top tier galleries that are out there. So you got to make sure that you're taking your time, finding the right galleries, make sure you're finding the right shows. Don't show your work in places that you don't want to be known for showing your work in if that's not right for you. Make sure that you have the right resume so that you can grow into other galleries, so you can grow into bigger galleries. And that's just a process that I feel works for me. I'm always trying to get into better and better galleries. I'm always trying to get my social media to grow more. That's why I'm on YouTube, of course, is to help grow my following so that I can sell more artwork, I can get more people on my Patreon account. All of these things are part of my realistic goals that I'm trying to do. But it's just a slow process of gradually improving your resume. I think that's the best way to look at it, is just slowly improve, get a few extra shows, get a few better shows, find ways to get a little bit further up. Now, if you want to be a traveling artist and do the weekend art festivals, that's a whole nother way to go. You can do both. There's a lot of different avenues you can take. You could just focus on teaching. You could focus on teaching online or in person. There's a lot of different ways to be a full-time artist, and we're all trying to figure it out. I don't have it fully figured out. I don't think anybody really does, and it's fun to always be growing and always be open to new directions to go. This next point I want to make about keeping your art practice simple maybe doesn't apply to everybody, especially hyper-real painters, but I would say allowing yourself to have imperfections in your artwork is a huge one for me. I used to work at architecture firms for about 14 years, and everything had to be figured out down to the 16th of an inch. I did these massive construction documents of senior living facilities and other big commercial buildings, and every aspect of those buildings had to be figured out down to the 16th of an inch. I got really tired of worrying about those kind of details, so I knew I wanted my artwork to be a lot looser. So I embrace imperfection. And if you're an impressionist style painter or wanting to be one, maybe you want to have a lot more brush strokes, this is where you can really have a lot more fun and embrace a style of painting that a lot of people appreciate. Now, if you want to have some moments where you have a lot of detail, that's great too, but find out what you like, find out what you can tolerate. Maybe you do enjoy the ability of getting every single detail figured out, having those hyper-real paintings, or maybe just having absolute precision in your work. But if you want to have an enjoyable, simplified art career, allow for some imperfections, allow for the expressiveness to come out in your work, and I think it will make your art career a lot more enjoyable and a little bit simpler as well. And another thing that you can really look at as far as keeping your art practice simple is to have simple subject matter. Now, you may have noticed from watching maybe my previous YouTube videos that I usually just have the one single subject in the middle of my work, and I play around with different abstraction, different colors, but that one subject is a way for me to personally keep it simple. Now, once I start adding hands, whether it's one or two hands or more of the body, that's when you start adding more and more complexity to your work. But if you're getting started, keep it simple. Keep your compositions as simple as you can when you're first getting started. I think if you jump into really complex paintings, especially if you're early in your art career, it will really dishearten you. You'll get really frustrated really easily. So make sure to keep that aspect simple as well. And finally, I think the one thing you just need to remember at all times is to keep yourself enjoying what you're doing. If you are creating artwork that you just hate, that you're doing just to satisfy the public, and it's not for you, this is the one place where you got to keep it simple. Just think, what do you like? What artist do you like to look at? That's usually a good sign. That's the kind of artwork you want to create. But don't create artwork for the masses. Obviously, you do have to consider what people will buy, but there is an overlap on what people want and what you want. So try to find that little sweet spot where both you and your audience like what you're doing, but always enjoy what you're doing. If you find yourself in a place where you just hate what you're painting, you're not having any fun, maybe give yourself a month break to refocus on a different type of series of paintings and see how those get received by others. So overall, I think those are the best tips I can come up with. Just keeping your schedule as laid out as you can, having simple materials, having fun with your work, keeping your subject matter simple. I think all these things will help to keep your artwork more enjoyable, and that will show through in your final work. Now, if you want to check out my painting process, some tutorials, some exercises, art downloads, all that good stuff, go over to my Patreon account, check that out. And of course, it would be awesome if you went ahead and liked, subscribed, all that stuff. Thank you so much, all you art geeks out there. I will talk to you again very soon.